Welcome to the Demand Generation Club podcast, the first podcast dedicated exclusively to SaaS B2B demand gen secrets and best practices as shared by some of the top leaders in the industry. This podcast is brought to you by SaaS MQL, the account-based marketing agency that helps SaaS companies land six-figure deals with highly targeted campaigns by combining intent data, automation, and a proven methodology. SaaS MQL can help your company generate millions of dollars in sales opportunities within just a few months. To learn more, go to saasmql.com.
Herb, I'm really glad to have you on the episode today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Franco, thank you for the opportunity.
Awesome. Let's begin right away. I'm going to ask you to tell us more about your career trajectory, your background, and a little bit about you.
Sure. So, I don't have my background is actually not in marketing. I spent most of my career doing professional services, implementing projects. I kind of got into this one at this company because we had a user group started, and the VP of marketing who was supposed to run this right after we announced it, our first user group, this person quit. And so the CEO asked me to run the user group the first time ever. We did it successfully. We got very high marks for our user group. So he asked me if I would take over the marketing group. So my current title now is I'm VP of marketing. I think everyone knows what that is. The other hat I wear is also VP of strategic initiatives. What that means officially is Rfxcel. I'm responsible for taking Rfxcel as a company, and we partner with the industry. My job is to contribute back to the industry. Internally, we make a joke, everything that other people don't want to do at Rfxcel becomes a strategic initiative. So I kind of
that makes sense. And so tell us what Rfxcel does. What's the company? What's the solution?
Sure, no problem. So Rfxcel, what we do is we give you detailed visibility into the supply chain. So regardless of what you manufacture, we can actually help you track the details of from beginning to end. We can track you down to individual units. We have things to let you know real-time IoT devices, so you know exactly where it is, what the temperature conditions are. We can track the raw materials that go into that, right, and allowing you for immediate recall. We start off in the pharmaceutical space, helping different pharmaceutical companies meet different regulatory requirements, but we've expanded into food and bev, into cosmetics, into many other industries. We're one of the few that actually also do government contracts. We're helping some governments actually do track and trace for within their governments.
And you've been there for a few years now, and you had a really tremendous success growing the company, which we'll talk in a second. How much different is the company from when you joined to what it is today, especially on the marketing side?
Oh my gosh, we like to look back at this laugh. So when I started, I look back at the PowerPoints we used to have, right? The PowerPoints we had in terms of our products, it was basically 4 colored boxes that we did in PowerPoint, right? Today, I think our portfolio includes over a dozen different product solutions, right? And we did this by building this organically. Not through acquisition, right? So the company has really kind of stepped up, but we've also kind of cleaned up the marketing message, right? We've really been working hard on the branding and the visibility of what we do.
And we might need to do a separate podcast on the whole strategic initiative thing, because it's very interesting, and I would love to learn more about that, because I love your kind of product development and product management experience. But I think today I want to really focus on this Guerilla branding that kind of came out of our conversation. And you said you were able to really get your name out without paying for it, without spending too much money for it. So tell us a little bit, what is Guerilla branding for you? How we define that?
Sure. So basically for us, Guerilla branding is figuring out how to get our name out there with very little money, right? And so we do a lot of creative things. I think where this started is at one point we were given I think the company felt generous, and that for a short time they gave us a lot of money to work with a PR firm, and this PR firm was charging us $10,000 a month to get our name out, to get get articles published with various magazines. For $10,000, they helped us cover Europe and the US, and we were getting about 1 article a month. But what they didn't do is they didn't cover the rest of the world. So Asia, Latin America, they didn't cover that. So what we did was we did it ourselves, right? And so while they're doing for the rest of for the US and Europe, right? We didn't have the tools. We started reading publications in these countries. We found these people on LinkedIn, and then we hired temporary workers in these countries who spoke the language to help us reach out and connect with them. We found that for literally pennies, we could get the same amount of volume, if not a little bit more, than a company we were paying $10,000 for. And I think that was the start of our idea for Guerilla branding, right? We found that if you do it right, if you're clever, right, you can actually do this yourself.
And so if I'm a VP of marketing in a startup and I want to obviously give it a shot to this Guerilla branding, what is the first step? What is the one thing that you recommend doing, and what is that worked for you?
So I'll tell you what worked first initially. I think initially we were just trying to get our name out into articles, right? And so before we try and use a PR firm, I think before this, we were lucky to get about one article a year with referencing our name, right? So what we did was we basically, we started looking through publications. So today what we do is now we don't need to go to LinkedIn anymore. We actually there are tools we buy where you can actually find out, if you want to talk about a certain topic, you can type it in and you can find out people who are out there writing these types of articles, right? You go in, you read what kind of type of articles they publish, you find out what they want to talk about. And you basically just reach out to them and say, hey, listen, would you be interested in an article on X? And you always pick X to be something that they want to talk about. But one of the keys we learned is it's not just a general article just to talk about things, but we find that either you talk about what to do or what not to do, right? And people tend to like to hear all the mistakes you've made or mistakes other people made. Those are the articles that are most interesting. So we find that when we do that and we reach out and we offer to do that, but two, when we write it, right, we never write it to highlight our capabilities, right? Our capabilities at best 2-3 sentences of, hey, this is so and so, this is Rfxcel, we do this. The other thing we do is when we write, or when my team write, we ghostwrite. We ghostwrite for our CEO, we ghostwrite for our VP of services, we ghostwrite for our CTO, right? And so we've worked long enough where we know what they think about, we know some of the funny jokes or not so funny jokes, and we tend to put that in, right? We tend to inject the personality of our company and our leaders into the articles. So I think that's the first thing that helped. But then just to add on, what we learned last year, right, during the pandemic is or pre-pandemic, we also learned that, with my hat of VP of Strategic Initiatives, where my task is to partner with the industry, right? We found that just going out and working with the industry, volunteering, not so much just volunteering, like things like, Habitat for Humanity, where you help build a house, right? But literally things that the industry needs, right? And I can give you examples of your interest, but we volunteer to do some of the things that people find hard. And you find that once you volunteer, your name gets out there. You get known as a person, hey, this company can pull together something. I'll give you an example you and I kind of talk about, right? So within the industry we worked in, right, there are many of us are building solutions to meet certain FDA requirements, right? But the problem is no one knows if all these solutions we're all building works. And so we reached out to the FDA and we offered to run a pilot where we tested every solution, including our competitor solution, to prove that they met the requirements. And that's pretty challenging because you realize if you're testing your competitors, you run the risk of getting sued, right? But we were fairly smart about how we did, and we put together a process that was very above board. What we found out was we had 2 competitors reach out and say, hey, Herb, your test cases aren't good enough. Let me show you how to improve them. One of our competitors said, look, we believe this is the best for the industry. They actually brought us into their offices. We sat in a conference room with the engineers. And we talked through how the technology worked and how our technology worked. You find out that if you work for the good of the industry, there's so many people who want to work with you. So not only did it give us more visibility, right? But it opened up for people that used to be our competitors. Now we work with them hand in hand for the good of the industry.
So basically your approach is, producing a lot of content that publisher wants to write about or they want to share, as well as, doing good for your industry, which I'm really interested in that. Let's go back to the content for 1 second, because
sure,
I know everyone knows that content is important and they need more, but how do you produce a consistent output of great content one after the other? when you don't have a big team under you?
What you do is you find you network with the people in your company, right? So as an example, if you talk to people in professional services and they're doing implementation, right? And this is you're not looking for content. You talk to them, you find out what they're doing, right? And so, for example, at one point we were talking to our professional services team, and they were telling us about the difficulties of implementation, right? And all of a sudden, that's a story we had, right? We weren't looking for it, but they tell us the things they've learned. And all of a sudden, we put them on a webcast with us, right? So they did a webinar, and then from the webinar, we got the bits and pieces of story, and then we had a content writer listen to that webinar, and then we developed further content from it. You can talk with maybe another example. We talked with CTO, and he mentions these deadlines coming up that we didn't know about, and so we talked to him. And so, well, what do you need to do? And all of a sudden, you have content, right? Even if you're a small company, right? If you talk to the people who are actively engaged with customers, who have to deliver, you will find a wealth of stories out there, right? Because they know it. And truth is, these are the people that your customers want to hear from, right? The people who are in the trenches, get those stories, surface those stories, and everyone will want to read them.
And you had also an interesting opinion about outsourcing the content, because I think you try, like probably everyone that is listening to this podcast as well has tried at some point to outsource content creation. How was your experience here, and would you recommend it?
It depends on what you're selling your company. So for us, outsourcing didn't work well because the solutions we sell are very niche, right? And so unless you understand in depth of what we do, what the industry requires and what we do, it's hard to put the content. So we found it easier to hire a good writer, bring him in full-time into our company, and then teach him our product so he can develop our voice, right? Because if you think of what you pay for a generic content writer, right, versus a full-time employee has to learn, it's actually not more expensive to bring on full-time. If you're working in industries such as, maybe some generic technologies, I shouldn't call it generic, but broader technologies such as like data warehousing, right? You can get away with hiring a content writer, but then again, they don't develop your voice, right? They don't know what's special about you, and you spend more time teaching them and telling them what to write. So for us, it's easier to take it inside.
Yeah. So you built basically a team, and you are leveraging some of other departments to provide some content, maybe in other format like webinars, I think you mentioned, or interviews, and then you turn that into something publishable. That's a good one.
No, we are not afraid to beg, borrow, and steal in this marketing. We talk to everyone internally, and then that's where we'll get a lot of our content.
And do you drive this content also based on SEO? So how do you match your SEO requirements or like your SEO plan with the content that you're getting published into these third-party channels? Like how do you balance that, like SEO keywords that you want versus what they want to publish?
That's a great question. And I think it depends for us, right? So for example, in markets where we're established and we know what the message is, right? We kind of drive the message, right? But as we try to enter into new markets, where we try to bring our technologies into different places where we may not have a strong standing, right? It's a little bit of an experiment, right? We publish, we track for certain keywords, and we see what comes in via SEO, right? At the same time, we're pushing out a message. So that kind of gives us guides what we want to speak about. We speak about that, and then we watch how many people kind of go back to those topics or publications. One of the other things we find very helpful is videos. I mean, one of the things is people really, really hate to read now. And if you had a choice of reading, a 5-page article or just watching a video, people will always go to video. We found that once we started pushing out videos, we saw a lot more people going out for that content. And so when we're going to new areas, we're always testing. We're testing the message, we're testing the words, we're testing what topics people are interested in. And what makes it challenging is we got what people are interested in, we have to align what we're good at, right? If I talk about something that is maybe very interesting, but we don't solve the problem with, well, it's my marketing dollars not returning, doing a return on investment.
And so also you talked about, doing good for the community, even if it doesn't come with, with a return attached, or at least not an immediate one. And so that kind of triggers my question on how do you measure the effectiveness of all these initiatives? Because obviously you are allocating resources to it, you're allocating budget, headcounts, etc. How can you measure the results at the end of the year, even if they are long-term plans? And how do you decide if you want to do more of it, if you need to do less? How do you balance that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think most marketing people say, like the further away you move from the tangible efforts, right? So we can measure SEO very effectively. We can measure a webinar, we can measure, but branding is hard because sometimes what you do in branding, you don't always tie to people coming to you unless they tell you, right? And so the way we measure it is one way we measure is we measure it by the stories we're able to give our salespeople, right? One of the things I know our salespeople always ask us is, Herb, can you give me a story I can tell, right? When I go, I don't want to just tell about the company. I want to tell about what our company is doing, right? And so that's one way. So the more stories we can equip our salespeople with to help them paint our company in a positive light, I think that's one way, right? But that doesn't always tie back to a deal one, right? Because it's many things that do. That's only one of it. I think the other thing we do tie back to is we do know occasionally people will reach back to us, right? And so we do always ask, if they didn't come through a webinar, if they didn't come through an event, right? We do ask, well, how did you hear about us? And we find that those are the ones that are frequent, that we can measure, right? Those are few and far between. But I will say that, if you're working in a space where the problem is not easy to solve, right? When you get your brand out there and people know who you are and they reach out to you, a lot of those informal meetings tend to be much bigger deals, right? The deals that we win through those, they tend to be, while they're, we call them the elephants, right? These are the few elephants that walk in. They're really big, but they're complex problems. And the thing is, if they could find the problem easily through advertising, they would. A lot of these problems that come in, they'll come and say, hey, Herb, we have a problem. It doesn't fit what other people are doing. These are the things we're trying to solve. Can you help us, right? And those are the ones that kind of come into us, right? Through branding. And maybe that's specific to our industry, but I'd be curious what other people are experiencing.
And what else have you found that you were able to do for the community? Other examples of things that you guys have done that have helped your industry, your community, the specific roles that you help?
I'll say that and in our industry, right? Because we're many of our competitors are trying to solve government deadlines, right? A government has given you a deadline to do this or do that, right? One of the things that we've learned to do, we found it is we're by reaching out to competitors and helping us all together to work together to help for a common good, right? If you've got an industry where you have some mandate, where some deadline comes in, or some requirement, I'll use it, for example, even something simple like just getting COVID vaccines distributed, right? Just simply reaching out to your competitor and say, hey, listen, this is for the good of the world. This is for the good of the deadline. This is for the good of our customers, right? Would you work with me to put together a program to help make this easier? You will find out that more often than not, a lot of competitors will work with you, especially if you don't try to hog the spotlight. If when you come together and present, you acknowledge them, that they're on the stage with you, right? It helps because people see that you can work together, right? And I think that's one of the areas we've been working towards, right? And I gotta be honest, I think a lot of the competitors that we've reached out to that work with us, to be frank, in certain areas, they've actually taken the show. They're stronger in certain areas than we are because I can't commit all my resources. But it's best for it's good for the state of the industry, right? It's good that we work together. It's good that collectively we work towards a goal instead of kind of spending all our efforts fighting each other and trying to win against each other.
Yeah, and I agree that nothing builds a better brand than your potential customers seeing that you are dedicated to help their community or their peers.
Yeah.
But obviously, when I think of the name Guerilla branding or Guerilla marketing, one of the first things that I visualize is the Salesforce, stunts that they pulled back in the days when they were a young startup at the Siebel conference, and they were wearing costumes and tried to drive press at the Siebel conference or Oracle conferences. Have you tried anything like that? Does that work?
Yeah, this is embarrassing because this is an example of something. So, I talk about stories of things that don't work, right? So I remember that Siebel story. I know that story. And so we had a conference once where I thought I'm gonna take credit for this failure, right? I thought it would be funny to kind of give out handouts to get people to kind of work with us. And so I convinced my team to make these first aid kits, right? And inside we had stickers like something like, is your current provider making you constipated, right? I think that was one of the slogans we had on there. That did not actually go off that well. I think one of the things I learned was, in different industries, in Siebel or sales, you work with salespeople, that kind of aggressive marketing work. But because in the time we were working with pharmaceutical companies where they're a little bit more conservative, that actually didn't work, right? And I think that was the genesis of where we fine tune our guerrilla marketing, right? We realized that, don't try to paint others in a negative light, right? Just work with them, right? The fact is, we work in an industry that is trying to do good for others, right? Medicines, pharmaceuticals, I know they get a bad rap, but if you ever talk to some of the people working in those companies, there's a passion about saving lives, right? They want to help. A lot of people who are in this industry want to help, and they don't view kind of that type of marketing as favorable. And so, that's an example we tried, and that's an example we realized, that's not the way to do it in this industry. And it's not the image we want for our company, actually.
It's less about trying to be clever and at all costs, and more just think of the good, think of what people actually need versus, taking the spotlight in different ways.
Yeah, exactly.
And is there any other initiative that you have in mind that maybe you want to try in the future, or things that could potentially work that you haven't tried yet, but you might want to test it, that will work towards the purpose of this branding?
I think we're not seeing new ways to try it, but I think one of the things we're trying to do is, as we move into different verticals, right? One of the things we find is we find that instead of us reaching out to develop to experts in other fields and try to speak their language, we're finding it's better to hire experts within the marketing group, right? So, for example, if you look at what we did is in the pharma space, right? We were always trying to be active in the industry, right? But until all of a sudden we put a marketing person who's responsible for being active, right? It changed it because we had a different mindset, right? Previous to this one, we had engineers and salespeople work in the industry, try to make ourselves known. But especially if you're an engineer, you have a different focus, right? But when you put a marketing person in, right, they instantly understand that they want to not only make a difference, right? But the way they make it, they try to leave behind a perception, right? And so one of the things we are looking at seriously is bringing in more vertical expertise into the marketing group versus us reaching out and partnering with them, right? Because when you have a person within the marketing group that, let's say, is an expert in food and beverage, and then that marketing person goes out and they're speaking, they always know what they want to get out of marketing. And then they drive for a certain message. Versus if I get someone who's an expert in the helping marketing, it's one of the things they have to do that, they don't care about. I shouldn't say they don't care, but they're not focused on our brand, right? They're focusing on helping marketing and going on to the other things they have to do.
Yeah, no, this is spot on. I love this last advice, and I have one more question for you, right, which is separate from the Guerilla branding, but I like to ask this question to every guest, which is, tell us one thing that is keeping you up at night, one thing that is really top of mind for you, you're trying to solve right now.
What keeps me up is I'm trying to figure out how we do more with less, right? I think when COVID hit, right, it happened right at the beginning of our fiscal year, and we were told, Herb, you're not gonna get more money. In fact, I need you to take a cut off your marketing budget. And so what happened last year was, not only did we take a cut, right, but the workload for us increased significantly, right? And in that year of COVID, we learned how to really kind of take what the money we have and really make sure we spread it, right? I think there's a joke we sometimes make, we say, we've learned to spread the peanut butter really thin here, right? But we still have we still managed to produce a good product. And I think I think that's the thing. If you look back to my example of we outsourced a PR company, we paid a lot of money for it, right? But the truth is, if you really step back and you look at how things are done, right, and you take a pragmatic approach, right, you'll find that you can do a lot with very little. One of the things we've learned to stretch our pennies is we do a lot of outsourcing using Upwork, right? We can reach out to people around the world who can give us expertise, right? And that for us, that was a game changer. But also you'll find that in some cases, bringing certain skills in-house is actually cheaper than trying to outsource.
Yeah, this is counterintuitive, your last point about outsourcing skill versus hiring, because the immediate thought is let's outsource, we don't have the budget to hire internally. But you are saying that it might be cheaper sometimes.
It is, and I think we're very careful about what we bring in-house, right? Wherever we want to make sure we develop the voice of the company, that someone truly can understand what we do. Those are the things we want to bring in-house, right? Because if you outsource that and teach someone else how to talk about your company, as soon as the contract's over, you got to teach someone else again, right? We want that in-house. We want people who really live and understand the company to be the spokesperson. Things such as things we do outsource, SEO, right? It's not a skill that requires special knowledge of our company, and people can do it better. Those are things we outsource. But things that require special knowledge company, we want to keep in-house.
That makes sense. Perfect. Herb, this was absolutely great. I really enjoyed the conversation. So thanks again for joining the Demand Generation Club and speaking on our podcast.
Franco, it was great talking to you, and I love hearing what you're doing with your group. I mean, it's actually kind of cool. I envy you. I wish I was younger.
Thank you so much, Herb.
All right. Thanks, Franco.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the Demand Generation Club podcast. If you're curious about how we're landing enterprise deals and unlocking millions in recurring revenue using account-based marketing and integrated direct mail campaigns, check out our website, saasmql.com. That's SAASMQL.com. We share tons of content every week on tried and true strategic ABM initiatives that actually generate pipeline from enterprise accounts. Thanks for tuning in.